frankly, if this were really a picture of Hitler, it would change history. I mean, this is potential proof positive that the guy got to Argentina. But then we get something like a picture, my antenna go up, like, uh-oh.
Could a single photo rewrite the final chapter of World War II? Hidden for decades, what's now believed to be Hitler's last known photograph has surfaced. And when experts zoomed in, what they saw left them speechless. This isn't the dictator history has etched in stone. Something's off. Why was this haunting image buried for so long? What secrets were staring back from the shadows? Now, with cutting-edge forensic scans and re-examined documents, historians are questioning everything we thought we knew about Hitler's final moments. This isn't just a photo, it's a revelation. And once you see what's inside the frame, you'll never look at history the same way again. A photo that shouldn't exist. For decades, the world believed it had seen the final images of Adolf Hitler. Grainy footage of him shaking hands with Hitler Youth in the bombed-out garden of the Reich Chancellery on March 20, 1945. That footage became iconic, the last visual documentation of the Führer, hunched, trembling, clinging to the remnants of a collapsing regime. Historians closed the visual chapter there. But buried within a mislabeled Soviet archive box, hidden in the rubble of Cold War bureaucracy, a single black and white photo has shattered that certainty. Unlike the garden shots, this image was darker, more intimate, and far more troubling. The photograph came to light when a junior archivist working in a decommissioned Russian facility stumbled upon a collection marked Internal Enemy, March 45. Inside were memos, handwritten reports, and one photo bearing the faint ink stamp of a Soviet intelligence unit. It showed Hitler, sunken, slack-faced, standing in what appeared to be an underground corridor. At first glance, it was dismissed as a staged propaganda piece, but a closer look changed everything. The background wasn't the garden, it wasn't even the Chancellery proper. This room was different, and it didn't appear in any existing blueprints of Hitler's known locations during the war's final weeks. Rumors had begun to circulate concerning a private inspection following an Allied bombing strike on March 28, 8 days after the last official photos had been made. That raised eyebrows. No public records mention any visual documentation after March 20th. Parked at the front door of the Führer bunker were cameras that had previously belonged to a photographer. It was said that then Führer himself had refused permission to appear before the press anymore. If this image could be proved authentic and the date was correct, that would mean only one thing. Somebody broke orders, and somebody wanted this moment saved in secrecy. The lighting is somehow strange. It is not sculpted like Nazi propaganda. There are no extreme angles and ceremonial framing. Instead, it says, "Quiet collapse" for Hitler. He isn't gesturing like he usually does. His hands are folded, and his eyes look a bit lost. Behind him, pieces of plaster hang from a broken ceiling. It's a very raw atmosphere stripped entirely of any theatricality. This doesn't scream power, it whispers desperation. For those who studied every publicly known photo of Hitler, this made a very jarring contrast. This was not the architect of the Third Reich, as history had frozen him. This was something quite different. Even more interesting, however, were the borders of the photograph, which showed details that could only be produced through digital enhancement. To the right of Hitler stands a faint chalkboard, covered in chaotic scribbles, and what appears to be a map of the Oder riverfront. Empty chairs, a crumpled overcoat on the floor, and what looks like a medicine vial atop a table pushed against the wall. In fact, these insignificant details became the primary objects of analytical expertise, for each of them evokes the sense of tumult and disintegration that occurs behind the sealed doors of the bunker. From every aspect in the image, this was not a formal visit. This was damage control. And yet, the most provocative detail of all wasn't on the front, but was instead scribbled on the backside of the photo. Captured from internal contact, 31 March 1945, not for official use. Faded but decipherable in Cyrillic. This phrase, internal contact, fueled rumors that someone from within Hitler's inner circle had broken ranks to deliver the photo into Soviet hands. Was it a double agent, a disgruntled officer, or a survivor planning a future of glory? No one can tell, but one harsh truth remains. This photograph existed, and that came as an unexpected shot, one that carried explosive consequences. That was just the beginning. What the team discovered next in the image's corner was enough to question whether Hitler's final hours were recorded more closely than anyone admitted. The hidden figure to Hitler's left. At first, the photograph seemed focused solely on Hitler, worn, isolated, and frail in the dim corridor. But as digital analysts enhanced the image and lightened the shadows, a figure began to emerge from the periphery just to Hitler's left. Blurred by motion and poorly lit, the silhouette was easy to miss at a glance. Yet what little could be made out was instantly curious. The man was not dressed in the standard issue Waffen-SS or Wehrmacht uniform. He wore a dark overcoat, civilian cut, and no visible insignia. His presence there, inside a zone supposedly locked down to Hitler's most loyal circle, was not only odd, but deeply suspicious. Rumors quickly circulated among the analysts. Some speculated this man was a liaison from a foreign intelligence service, perhaps Italian or even neutral Swedish, sent to broker a desperate truce or deliver secret terms. Others whispered that he could have been a private physician or scientist, smuggled into the bunker under heavy secrecy as Hitler's health crumbled. A few even suggested the figure might have been part of an internal resistance cell operating under deep cover. None of these theories could be proven, but all of them added to the photo's growing legend. It was an alert but casual posture with his head slightly turned towards Hitler. Although his face was shadowy, forensic software detected the hint of a mustache as well as a strong jawline, possible features that didn't correspond to any known photograph of an adjutant of Hitler. Matching the figure with wartime staff databases led to nothing further, creating yet more speculation. Some believed the image had been purposefully manipulated before reaching Soviet hands, with the unknown figure deliberately blurred. If true, it would mean that someone wanted the man erased from the official narrative. A rather interesting ruin also alleged the man to have been Albert Speer, Hitler's Minister of Armaments, who, for sure, visited the Führer in his last days and carried private reservations against him. Speer claimed that he made his final visit to the bunker on April 23rd. But if this photograph was taken before that time, and the blurred man was indeed Speer, it means he returned earlier than that, or never left at all. The thought that Speer could have witnessed the decline of Hitler and later whitewashed it in his memoirs is a horrifying yet credible notion in the minds of historians. Many things somewhat thickened the enigma, one of which was that Hitler's body slightly tilted toward the unknown man. In this perspective, he appears to be listening rather than speaking, an unusual dynamic for one who was renowned to be a ruthless dictator. Was the man giving orders, handing over bad news, perhaps offering intelligence that could have made a difference in Hitler's last decisions? The photo gave no answers, but many unsettling possibilities. An informal posture like this felt almost like a crack in the meticulously cast facade of power for a regime that was otherwise known for its rigidity and obsession with hierarchy. Even more horrific, the imprints of a second shadow on the back wall denote that there was possibly a third person barely out of frame. Either someone who purposely stepped back out of the view or someone never meant to be captured in the photograph. Was this a clandestine meeting? A debrief? A final judgment? There were no names inscribed on that image, and no official record acknowledged anyone else's presence that day except Hitler. And here was this man in the picture, an image captured in silence. Whoever he was, and whatever remarks he made, Any inference to his presence surely deflated the popular belief that Hitler's final hours were in isolation, let alone that they were highly compromised. Even more baffling was what Hitler himself was holding, something small, metallic, and previously unreported in any account of his last days. The object in Hitler's hand. When forensic analysts zoomed in on Hitler's trembling hands, they weren't expecting to find anything unusual. Most believed the Führer's final photos would reflect only the physical collapse visible in his posture and face. But nestled tightly between his fingers was a slim, metallic object, barely wider than a pencil, yet clearly held with care. It wasn't a cigarette, it wasn't a pen, and it definitely wasn't standard military equipment. The shape, sheen, and size matched nothing previously seen in photos of Hitler from the war. From that moment, everything changed. Rumors swirled almost immediately. Some claimed it was a micro-cylinder used to store final orders, rolled up documents in tightly sealed capsules, often used in espionage to ensure secret messages could pass through enemy lines. These containers were typically given to couriers, not heads of state. If Hitler had one in hand, it implied either desperation or paranoia. Was he sending a final instruction to a surviving general, passing coordinates? Or worse, delivering a command that would only be uncovered after the war's end? Other theorists cast an even more sinister suggestion, one in which they believed the object might have been modified from a cyanide capsule case. This kind of case was one that was issued to Nazi officers throughout the war, so that in the case of capture, potassium cyanide could be used. However, this capsule was not like a field-issued poison device. It was longer, sleeker, and capped with what appeared to be a clasp or seal. This raised some speculation that it was perhaps used to keep something else entirely, an artifact, a list of names, or a rolled-up directive that was intended for after-the-war activation. Some whistleblowing found their ways into archives that it had even something to do with the so-called werewolf orders, rumored final sabotage actions to take place once Hitler was dead. Nothing has confirmed this, but many hundreds of sleepless nights among intelligence historians were stirred by the time and object. Some specialists consider it to be possibly a medical item. Last doctor visits saw several doctors noting that Adolf Hitler relied on certain unfamiliar pharmaceutical compounds, most commonly experimental mixes compounded by Dr. Theodor Morell. The object could, in fact, include medications meant for purposes of suppressing tremors, nausea, or anxiety. Thus, this belief affirms long-harbored rumors of deteriorating conditions embraced by Hitler himself: Parkinsonism, chronic abdominal pains, and even alleged use of opiates. His handling of the object suggested personal dependence, not dispensational. It was not given to him. He clutched it. Even more intriguing, the object was not seen in earlier footage taken just days before. Images showing the March 20th ceremony feature his hands empty. Awkward, perhaps, but unencumbered. That little, significant change in behavior suggested something had altered. Analysts speculated that the photo might have been made after a severe health incident, perhaps a seizure or fall, that led Hitler to keep the apparatus close. If so, that was not merely physical decline. It was an emblem of a man holding on to what little control remained in his hands. Before experts could draw conclusions, a new clue emerged. Not in the photo, but in the records of a soldier stationed nearby. The bunker memo that changes everything. Tucked deep within a Soviet intelligence dossier was a memo so overlooked it had collected dust for decades. Typed in fading ink on brittle wartime paper, it bore the dry title, Incident Report, Unauthorized Imaging, Berlin Sector. But what it described was anything but mundane. Dated March 30th, 1945, 10 days after Hitler's final confirmed public appearance, the memo referenced photographic activity inside a restricted lower-level structure beneath the Reich Chancellery. Analysts who stumbled across it weren't sure what they had found, until they matched the location's description to the same space seen in the mysterious Hitler photograph. That's when things took a turn. According to the document, an unnamed officer reported an unauthorized imaging incident inside a sub-chancellery room during an emergency command review. The report's wording was clinical, but its implications were explosive. It detailed how a civilian or non-military individual had brought a camera into a classified meeting space, an action strictly forbidden by Nazi protocol in Hitler's proximity. The report suggested that while no punishment had yet been carried out, the breach was under active internal investigation. That phrase alone sent shivers through the research team. It suggested that the Nazis themselves knew this photo existed and tried to cover it up. There was a flurry of rumors. Some believed that the memo was directly related to the blurry figure next to Hitler in the rediscovered image. Could that have been the photographer? Or could he have been photographing just outside the frame, unbeknownst to Hitler? One theory put about in the archival circles suggested that an adjutant loyal to Heinrich Himmler had purposely taken the photo, perhaps to have it available in arguing leverage over the Allies if negotiations became necessary. Should this be true, such action would suggest to the contrary that by then factions within the Nazi regime had already turned against their own leader in preparation for a post-Hitler power shift. What lent weight to the theory was a cryptic phrase in the final paragraph of the memo. The subject appeared unaware. Visual state degraded. Interaction minimal. That line not only implied surveillance, but contained the suggestion of someone in rapid decline being seen, if not obeyed. Military historians noted that this sort of language had been more commonly used in prisoners' reports than in the briefings of commanders. By this point, was Hitler already regarded as a liability by his inner circle? The memo appeared to indicate as much. Amidst all this tension was a rough floor plan sketched on the back of the document, showing a non-existent room on the official chancellery blueprints. Its location under the main war room was nearly spot on to the strange half-collapsed chamber visible in the mysterious photograph. Soviet investigators at the time dismissed the sketch as either a decoy or misdirection. However, modern analysts acknowledged that it coincided perfectly with the background captured in the photo-exposed piping, half-bricked walls, and remnants of a sandbag barricade. So if the room did exist, there were still secrets about this bunker complex that no historian had ever accounted for. There was yet another salient detail, the signature at the bottom of the memo, which could be seen, but faintly so, by ultraviolet light. The initials, it appeared, were J.K. Rumors have linked these to SS officer Joseph Kruger Kramer, a known associate of Martin Bormann and one of the regime's more secretive internal enforcers. Should Kramer have written this memo, it would give weight to the view that the picture was taken during some sort of internal power audit, a visual record of Hitler's failure to lead, held for backroom succession discussions. There is no way to substantiate this. If it is true, then it transforms the photo from a mere historical record into a real-time weapon. A quiet visual coup. Undoubtedly, the most disturbing aspect is the thought that this picture, this fortuitous glance into Hitler's disintegration, was never really meant to be seen. Not by his followers, not by the masses, not even by the victors of the war. It was destined to disappear into classified folders and gray archives. Just one frame capturing the exact instant when Adolf Hitler's myth was corrupted from within. This phrasing, compromised state, sent chills down the experts' spines. Had Hitler already begun to unravel in ways hidden from the public? Signs of physical and mental collapse. In the photo, Hitler appears aged beyond his years. His frame is gaunt, his shoulders slumped forward in a posture that betrays pain and fatigue. Experts who reviewed the image side by side with footage from just 10 days earlier noted something startling. His deterioration had accelerated dramatically. His cheeks hang loose from his jaw. His lips look dry and thin. And his skin tone is sickly, even through the grainy monochrome. Most disturbingly, a visible tremor in his left hand is captured mid-shake, blurred slightly in the image. This wasn't the iron-willed dictator portrayed in propaganda films. This was a man on the edge of neurological collapse. Rumors had long circulated about Hitler's medical condition in the final months of the war. Some claimed he was battling advanced Parkinson's disease. Others whispered about possible syphilis or substance-induced psychosis, a result of the strange pharmaceutical cocktails administered by his personal doctor, Theodore Morell. This photograph added fuel to every one of those theories. His stance is unbalanced, his knees slightly bent inward, and his feet awkwardly angled. For physicians studying body language and posture, it was unmistakable. This was not a healthy man standing. This was someone barely holding himself upright. Some say that his eyes, usually so sharp and intense on photographs, appeared clouded. One analyst stated they were swimming, which is more or less what is observed in late-stage Parkinson's, especially when combined with heavy-duty doses of stimulants or sedatives. Others suspected a mild facial paralysis from a little bulge on his left side of the face symptoms that would warrant neurological injuries. His mouth was neither firm nor commanding. Having caught an awkward mid-expression, it drooped slightly, and experts believe that he may have been slurring at the time the picture was taken. Digital lip readers attempted to decipher the words, but the little incident of motion blur spoiled everything. Nevertheless, the narrative was clear and truly damning. This was not the Hitler his generals feared. The photo was a source of silent panic for the surviving Nazi officers surveying the ruined post-war Berlin. Some had chronicled Hitler's decline in their memoirs, but in stark captures of that image was a certainty that only suggested otherwise in their descriptions. A man broken, not by bullets or bombs, but by the crumbling of his own body. In hindsight, the real reason for denying photographers entry into the bunker from March 20th onwards does not seem a matter of security, as much as an attempt to hold on to the myth of the invincible Führer. This condition of his, bent over and shaking, eyes glazed and starkly confused, was one which Hitler never wanted the outside world to behold. There was also talk of private incidents that seemed to echo the photograph's contents. A bunker orderly account claimed that Hitler collapsed in private on March 26th, requiring 2 guards to carry him back to his quarters. Another denoted episodes of incoherent speech in which he rambled on about secret weapons and betrayals that never existed. This was, at the same time, Hitler was said to accuse long-dead allies of treason and give contradicting orders to different units within the same day. Therefore, that picture now indeed seems to document the physical gory side of that mental unraveling. But it wasn't just his health that alarmed researchers. It was what surrounded Hitler in the blurred corners of the frame, a swastika missing its arm. It's the background that often tells the truth in a photograph. And in this one, behind Hitler's withered frame and glassy eyes, something subtle but unmistakable catches the eye. A tattered Nazi flag hangs unevenly on the wall. But more than just weathered fabric, it's visibly torn, specifically along the lower right quadrant of the swastika, where one of the hooked arms is missing entirely. For those who've studied Nazi iconography and its use in propaganda, this isn't just a damaged banner. It's a symbol that has lost its symmetry, its completeness, and, some would argue, its authority. This image wasn't meant for public eyes, and the damaged flag is proof. In every official photograph or film released by the regime, Nazi symbols were pristine, calculated, and centrally featured. Even in the bombed-out streets of Berlin, banners were dusted and realigned before photo ops. The presence of a torn swastika, especially so close to Hitler himself, would have been considered a dangerous message. Rumors began circulating among archivists and war historians that the photo may have been intentionally suppressed, not because of Hitler's health, but because of this very background detail, an unintentional omen of collapse. Some of the theorists view the torn banner as more than an unfortunate coincidence. They suggest it may have been an act of quiet defiance by someone in the bunker. Perhaps a junior officer or guard distraught with the course of the war deliberately pulled down the flag from the wall. Others see signs that the room, perhaps a lower-level part of the chancellery, was moved into quickly, as post a bombing or fire, when no one had time to attend to the flag's damage. In any case, the flag's torn state bears a meaning. The regime, once consumed with perfection and control over its imagery, had started to dissolve from the inside out. The intrigue is further intensified by the location in which everything plays out. Recently discovered architectural drafts reveal that the room wasn't part of any known press briefing areas or strategy spaces for Hitler. It looks very much like drafts of the so-called Eiserner Keller, hardened cellar for unofficial tribunes and intern purges. That makes the presence of a damaged Nazi flag in such a room all the more sinister, or, if this is indeed the case, because it would imply that the regime had moved past even their boulevard. They no longer cared about fronts, but were conducting final acts of brutality and desperation under a fractured emblem of its own making. Even more disturbing are the charred edges on the flag visible only after forensic light scanning. The right corner appears burned, as though scorched by fire or explosives. Theories range from accidental bomb damage to darker possibilities. One persistent rumor suggests that the room had recently hosted a failed attempt to destroy documents or conduct a private execution. It was certainly not a far-fetched idea. As the Red Army closed in, several SS divisions reportedly carried out panic-driven purges and eliminations within their own ranks. Could this photo have been taken in the aftermath of one such event? The details support the possibility. Yet, the most piercing question stays without an answer. Why did no one fix it? The regime had its rituals even in chaos. The flags were not merely decoration. They were pronouncements proclaiming unity and strength. That one stayed up there on the wall, visibly damaged, maybe scorched. That speaks louder than any military order or memo could ever do. It is a real-time visual metaphor, a dictator standing there beneath the damaged icon of his ideology. And somebody forever captured that moment somewhere in the bleak silence of the bunker. The very cracks were not only political or military, they were inscribed within the walls. And then, finally, the AI scan revealed the most damning clue of all, one that had escaped human eyes for decades. The last face identified. As digital analysis of the photograph continued, experts turned their attention to the background, not the broken symbols or the eerie atmosphere, but to a faint blur of a second face partially visible behind Hitler's right shoulder. For weeks, the image resisted identification. The angle was wrong, the lighting poor, and the man's face turned slightly to the side. But with high-resolution enhancement and AI-driven facial recognition software, the team made a breakthrough. A match appeared. General Hermann Fegelein. And with it, the entire narrative of Hitler's final days was thrown into chaos. Official records state that Fegelein, a high-ranking SS officer and brother-in-law to Eva Braun, was executed by the Nazi regime on April 28, 1945, just 2 days before Hitler's death. He had reportedly tried to flee Berlin and was found drunk, in civilian clothes, attempting to escape. By Hitler's personal order, he was arrested and allegedly shot in the garden of the Reich Chancellery. But if he appears in this photograph, then either the execution was staged, or the timeline we've believed for nearly 80 years is wrong. The rumors erupted into life. Some said that Fegelein had never even made an attempt at desertion, and that his arrest and alleged execution were simply part of an internal purge based on Hitler's ever-increasing paranoia and disillusionment. Others questioned whether possibly Fegelein possessed sensitive information, perhaps concerning events within the Führerbunker, or last-minute plans for escape. If so, according to these theories, he must have been kept alive longer than was officially reported, or that the death itself was a mere cover to eliminate someone who had seen too much. This photo, if taken in late March or early April, shows him not as a fugitive, but rather at ease in the very midst of Hitler's inner circle. In another twist to the legend thickening, Fegelein's documented movements during this period remain strangely nebulous. Military records go silent after mid-March, and his name appears erratically in chancellery logs. Never did Eva Braun speak in public about the fate of her brother-in-law, nor was any body ever retrieved. Such has led some to speculate that he may have been a scapegoat for a deeper concealment. And he certainly does not appear to be disgraced in the above photograph. Dressed smartly in uniform and standing with well-deserved confidence, not the sort of posture characteristic of a man staring death in the face. Fegelein's military ID photographs are definitely mirrored by the blurred figure's countenance with uncanny precision. From jawline to widow's peak to the trademark mustache. The level of evidence from forensic software was registered at a 93% match, an almost unshakable premise when applied to the milieu of wartime photography. This identification, although little more than a whisper among researchers, has already begun to change how institutions describe the final days of the Third Reich. This image not only questions the very execution of Fegelein, but it also questions the integrity of Hitler's command in those final days. Who else remained loyal during this time? Or more chillingly, who else could have been a candidate for removal? The implications are staggering. If Fegelein lived beyond the date we were told, and if Hitler tolerated his presence until mere days before his death, then a new story begins to emerge. One not of betrayal and punishment, but of selective rewriting, paranoia, and the strategic deletion of people and facts. It hints at a Führerbunker far more chaotic than previously imagined, a den of silence, secrets, and last-minute decisions not just about battles, but about who would live to tell the story, and who would be erased from it entirely. The official timelines begin to crack under the weight of these possibilities, suggesting far more manipulation than historians have accounted for. What if the truth was never meant to survive those bunker walls at all? What would you have done if you had found this photo first? Would you believe what the documents told you, or what your eyes uncovered? If stories like this challenge everything you thought you knew about history, then don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and watch the next video shown on screen. Thanks for watching.